For the next 3 days, Nathan moved like a ghost through his own life. To Sarah and Leo, he was the same hard-working, devoted man they had always known, but behind his calm eyes, a storm was brewing. He sat in his corner office at the bank, the city sprawling beneath him, but he wasn't looking at market trends. Instead, he had a private file open on his encrypted laptop. It was the background check on Julian Vance. Every detail he uncovered felt like a fresh incision into his soul. Julian wasn't just some random drifter. He was Sarah's high school sweetheart from her small hometown, a man who had spent 5 years in a state penitentiary for aggravated assault and grand theft auto. He had been released exactly 6 years ago, just months before Sarah and Nathan's wedding. The timeline was a jagged blade. Nathan remembered how Sarah had suddenly become ready to settle down, how she had pushed for a quick wedding, and how she had fallen pregnant almost immediately after their honeymoon. At the time, Nathan had felt like the luckiest man alive. Now, he felt like the world's most pathetic fool. The monthly $2,000 transfers weren't for business, they were a pension for a criminal, a payoff to keep the biological father of his son at a distance, or perhaps, to keep him close enough to watch his prize grow. But the deepest sting came when Nathan tracked Julian's current employment. Julian Vance had recently been hired as a private chauffeur and security detail for Harrison Reed, Sarah's father and the patriarch of a multi-million-dollar real estate empire. The realization hit Nathan with the force of a tidal wave. Julian wasn't just lurking in the shadows of the cemetery, he was inside the inner circle. He was driving Nathan's father-in-law to medical appointments, standing guard at family events, and likely laughing behind Nathan's back every time they crossed paths. This wasn't just a simple affair, it was an infiltration. Nathan realized that Sarah's father, whose health was rapidly failing due to a chronic heart condition, had no idea he was employing the man who had secretly fathered his only grandson. Or did he? Nathan began to question everything. Was Sarah's father complicit, or was he another victim of her elaborate web? That evening, Nathan was forced to attend a formal dinner at the Reed estate. The grand mansion, with its vaulted ceilings and oil paintings of ancestors, felt like a mausoleum. As Nathan pulled his car up to the front entrance, he saw him. Julian Vance was standing by the heavy oak doors, dressed in a sharp black suit that couldn't quite hide the rugged, predatory edge of his physique. Their eyes met in the rearview mirror. Julian didn't flinch. He didn't look away. Instead, he gave a slow, barely perceptible nod, a silent acknowledgement from one man who owned the title to another who owned the blood. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with the scent of expensive cigars and the sterile smell of medical equipment. Harrison Reed sat at the head of the long mahogany table, looking frail but still possessing the sharp, piercing gaze that had built his fortune. Sarah sat to his right, looking radiant in a silk gown, her hand resting gently on her father's arm. She was the picture of the dutiful daughter. Across from them, Leo was playing quietly with a silver spoon, his small face illuminated by the candlelight. Nathan looked at the boy, the child he had taught to ride a bike, the child whose scraped knees he had bandaged, the child who called him dad. Every time he looked at Leo's jawline, he saw Julian. Every time the boy laughed, he heard a stranger's voice. The love was still there, a painful, aching weight, but it was now poisoned by a growing resentment that Nathan hated himself for feeling. During the meal, Harrison cleared his throat, a sound that commanded instant silence. He announced that his lawyers were finalizing the updates to his estate. Because of his health, the majority of the Reed family holdings would be placed into a blind trust, with Sarah as the primary executor. But there was a catch: the trust would officially dissolve and transfer full ownership to Leo on his 21st birthday. Until then, Sarah and Nathan would manage the empire. Nathan felt Sarah's hand tighten on his under the table. To the outside world, it looked like a gesture of support. To Nathan, it felt like a predator marking its territory. She wasn't just securing a future for her son, she was securing a future for the man standing by the front door. After dinner, Nathan slipped away under the pretense of taking a business call. He wandered into the darkened library, a room filled with the scent of old paper and leather. He knew Harrison kept his private ledgers and personal correspondence in a hidden safe behind the mahogany paneling. As a banker, Nathan knew the mechanics of these things. He had watched Harrison open it dozens of times over the years. With his heart hammering against his ribs, Nathan navigated to the hidden keypad and entered the code, Sarah's birthday. The safe clicked open. He wasn't looking for money. He was looking for leverage. He found a thick, manila envelope labeled Confidential HR. Inside were medical records. But they weren't for Harrison. They were blood tests and genetic screenings for Leo, dated 4 years ago. Nathan's breath hitched. His father-in-law had known. Harrison had suspected the truth years ago and had run the tests in secret. But as Nathan flipped to the final page, he found a handwritten note from Harrison to Sarah. It read, "I know he isn't a Reed by blood, and I know who his father is. But for the sake of the empire and the family name, this secret dies with me. Keep that man on a leash, or I will cut you both out of the will entirely." Nathan stood in the dark, the paper trembling in his hand. The betrayal went deeper than he could have ever imagined. It wasn't just Sarah. It was the entire family. He was the only one living in a lie, the only one who was truly an outsider. He heard the heavy thud of footsteps approaching the library. He quickly shoved the documents back into the safe and closed the panel just as the door creaked open. It was Julian. The chauffeur stood in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the hallway light. "Mr. Reed is looking for you, sir," Julian said, his voice a low, gravelly rasp. There was no sir in his tone, only a mocking challenge. Nathan straightened his tie, his face a mask of cold steel. He walked toward Julian, stopping just inches from the man's face. The air between them was electric with unspoken violence. "I was just admiring the history in this room, Julian," Nathan said, his voice calm and lethal. "It's amazing what people try to bury. But the thing about dirt is, eventually, someone always digs it up." Julian's eyes narrowed, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face for the first time. Nathan brushed past him, his mind already spinning. He wasn't just going to leave. He wasn't just going to sue for divorce. That would be too easy. They wanted the empire? They wanted the bloodline to win? Fine. He would let them think they were winning. He would play the role of the devoted husband and the successful banker until the moment was right. He would use his position at the bank to quietly bleed the Reed accounts dry, moving assets into offshore shells they could never touch. He would turn their own greed against them. As he walked back into the dining room to join his family, Nathan felt a cold, dark clarity settle over him. The war was no longer about love. It was about total destruction. He looked at Sarah, who blew him a kiss from across the room. And he smiled back, a smile that didn't reach his eyes, the smile of a man who was about to burn everything they loved to the ground. End part 2.